Good afternoon and welcome to Unity Church. To those in our sanctuary and those joining us online, I'm the Reverend Dr. Oscar Sinclair. It's my honor to serve this congregation as your senior minister. Welcome to this time and this place where sorrow, joy, memory, and hope weave together in remembrance of Dag Ostergren, whose presence in this life brought spirit and sustenance to so many. Today we join in the ancient tradition of celebrating a well-lived life with stories, song, honesty, mourning, and love. All are welcome here. May you find it a blessing. We are mindful here at Unity Church that many faith traditions inform our individual journeys, and we hold in gratitude the foundations of love and service that those traditions hold in common. As is our Unitarian Universalist tradition, we light a flaming chalice to mark the time of our gathering as sacred time, held in the light and warmth of love and truth. The light of a human life is sacred, we say. It is sacred in its being born, it is sacred in its living, and it is sacred in its dying. In the presence of life, we say no to death. In the presence of death, we say yes to life. Would you please rise and join me in our responsive reading this afternoon? The words are printed in your order of service. I'll read the Roman font if you read the italics. George Odell wrote, "We need one another when we mourn and would be comforted. We need one another when we are in despair, in temptation, and need to be recalled to our best selves again. We need one another in the hour of success, when we look for someone to share our triumphs. We need one another when we come to die and would have gentle hands prepare us for the journey. Please be seated. Memorial services are sacred times. This is some of the oldest work that we do as religious communities, marking the transition between someone we love being here with us and then being without. So even when we call it a celebration of life, it is right that there is grief on these days. Someone we loved is no longer here. Dag Ostergren lived. His life touched ours, and now he has died. In our Unitarian Universalist tradition, we have ways of holding these days when celebration and grief are intertwined. We tell stories. We don't dwell in our services on what happens after death. That's, we say, between each person and their conscience. But we tell Doug's story, and in doing so, we remember him. So as we begin, take a moment, center yourself in this space, this time, these people. Put your feet flat on the ground. Feel the good earth holding you. Take a deep breath. We begin by sharing a moment of silence for our own prayer, reflection, or meditation to gather our individual thoughts and feelings to remember the person that Doug was and how he touched our lives, and prepare to say farewell. Amen.
I'm Joan, Doug Ostergren's middle daughter, and want to share a few thoughts about my dad. Family and friends were central for my dad. My dad had many families in his life. Of course, there was our own family of 5, my dad, my mother Phil, my older sister Jan, and younger sister Mary. We were close and had many great adventures together, sharing canoe trips and ski vacations. Our vacations were always active, involved learning new things and being outside. Another family is our extended family, the CDOs. My dad and his identical twin, Don, were very close. My dad was a dentist. Don was an orthodontist. They lived about a quarter-mile away from each other on Turtle Lake, had cabins close to each other near Ely. It was a rare day that they did not talk on the phone or work together on a project. Our families gathered for dinner many Sunday evenings, and my family has a close bond with Charlie, John, and Sarah, their partners and their kids. Don and his wife Louise have passed away, but we still gather regularly as a family. Other families in my dad's life were his dental family, the canoe group, and the Unity community. At the dental practice, my dad was a mentor to his mostly female staff and was a role model by the kind and caring way he treated his patients and staff. My father retired from his dental practice in 1990, 35 years ago. Former dental patients still ask about him, and he continued to keep in touch with his former staff, with one of them visiting my folks the week before my dad passed away. The canoe group went on annual trips for over 50 years. Unity became a part of my dad's life more recently, but the relationships he built and the opportunities to engage with community were an important part of my parents' life in their later years. They volunteered and went on community building trips, including one to Bolivia, where they celebrated their 60th anniversary on the top of a mountain while building greenhouses for the community and sleeping on the floor of a medical clinic. They were in their mid-80s at the time. Good work. My dad loved to be outside and liked to work with his hands. He was a true artist. You don't usually think of dentists as artists, but to do good work, they need to be very skilled with their hands and have an eye for how things should look. Dad loved building and fixing things. He spent many hours maintaining the house in Shoreview and the cabin up north. He always had a project, from making cradles, play kitchens, and balance beams for the grandkids, to taking a course and building a timber frame shed at the cabin. He also spent many hours using his talents to volunteer weekly for Habit for Humanity. Later in life, Dad and Don took up wood carving. His artistry is on display at the cabin, where he carved doors and trim pieces. He also built and carved jewelry boxes for Jan, Mary, and me, bowls, and chests for the grandkids. These are things we will treasure forever. Adventure. My dad loved a good adventure, whether it was for a day or much longer. He also liked to try new things. He was into fitness and nutrition before it was fashionable, jogging pretty much before they made running shoes. We drank non-fat powdered milk because it was healthy, and then there was a brief time when eating a hamburger patty for breakfast was the new fad. Dad kept bees for 30 years, no matter that he was allergic to them, producing 400 pounds of honey in the final year. Dad and Mom traveled to China in 1987. He brought back a pitchfork, which he cut in half so it would fit in his backpack. He figured he could reassemble it when he got home. Perhaps the biggest adventure was joining the Peace Corps after he retired. Dad and Mom spent 18 months in Nepal starting a dental clinic and mentoring a young Sherpa woman who was trained as a dental therapist. Their clinic was in Namche Bazaar, a village on the trekking route to Mount Everest. The world passed by their door. They made a difference in the community and made lifelong friends. Partner. My dad and Mom were partners for almost 71 years. They shared their sense of family, work, and adventure with us, and their relationship was a role model for many. From their honeymoon canoe trip to their adventures traveling to far-off places and their time in Nepal, they valued and respected each other, recognizing the special qualities that each of them brought to the relationship, and shared their love for life with family and friends. Dad, you lived a great life and will be missed by many. May the long-time sunshine upon you, all love surround you, and the pure light within you guide your way on. Sigurd Olson was a well-known Minnesota author, a wilderness activist, and a favorite author of Dad's. The last words Sigurd left in his typewriter before he passed away were, "A new adventure is coming up, and I'm sure it will be a good one. Dad, I know yours will be a good one too."
Hello, everyone. I'm Mary, the youngest, as you've heard already. I'm reading on behalf of Larry Smith, and you might think, who is Larry Smith? And I'll get to that more. But Mom, I wanted to start off by saying Larry Smith is married to Diane Smith, who Mom and Diane were sorority sisters in college. They first met. And they really hit it off, and then when they found their significant others, then that's how the whole connection of couples and adventures started. And one thing I wanted to say, I believe it was for a sorority gathering where Mom needed a date. She invited Doug Ostergren, and so she was the one that made the first move. He went, and that started the whole thing. Good choice, Mom. Oh. Oh, one other thing. You all had available to you a pamphlet up there coming in, and it's out there if you don't. And Diane and Larry wrote it, and they put it together. They're in California, I'll get to that. But then they also, over the years, after about 55 years, published a 50-page book about what I'm going to be talking about. So there'll be more to read for you. I'll do the highlights. Dad was one of the founders of the BWCA Bunch, a group of friends from college that canoed together each year for 50 years in the wilderness of northern Minnesota and Canada, called Canoe Country. Doing this each year was an important part of my dad's life. His paddling partner, Larry Smith, who lives in California and is unable to travel, has written the piece that's available to you at the church entrance. I believe you will find it informative and enjoyable. So now, please allow me to share a couple of Larry's highlights from their adventures together. This is Larry now speaking. Doug and I were returning from a quiet afternoon of fishing, paddling back across a mirror of water at low-angled sun with cirrus clouds reflected. It seemed we were looking down on 40,000 feet. It was so realistic and disoriented, it made us dizzy. Another event was an electrical storm with no rain, yet lighting the sky in every direction. Spectacular display by Mother Nature. We'd never seen anything like it, ever. Rituals can be important parts of each trip. One example was our commitment to making only one trip across each portage. We're talking up to half a mile, sometimes more. This meant double packing, easily 80 to 100 pounds on our backs, and if you were carrying a canoe, you also carried a pack. Very He-Man stuff. We remembered coming to a portage where a group of college guys were preparing to cross and had their gear strewn all over the ground. You could read their minds when we arrived. Sheesh, these old guys are going to take forever crossing this portage. Their jaw-dropping was palpable when we picked up everything and disappeared in the woods down the path. Again, all very macho, and might I say, impressive. Apparently, this is one of Doug's favorite stories he enjoyed telling. I'm 93 now, and I feel so fortunate to have had this unique experience with my buddies that enriched my life. Doug was special. He was my paddling buddy, my best friend, and husband to a lady I admire, and who together have raised an exceptional family, and that exceptional family has raised exceptional family as well. As couples, we shared a love for adventurous outings, bareboat sailing in the Virgin Islands, rafting and hiking in the Grand Canyon, hiking in Switzerland, skiing in Aspen. Doug had a rare talent that no one else I know possessed to such an extent. For example, he was trusted instantly by nearly every person he met, which was actually felt by that person. It had something to do with Doug's physical presence, his demeanor, his slight smile, I'll add, that little twinkle in his eye, that friendly twinkle. His obvious interest in you showed and was nearly always received as genuine, producing a response from you, I like this guy. I bet I can trust this guy. What a plus in leadership and human interaction. You are going to be missed, Doug, big time. Larry.
Every life is multifaceted, like a jewel that holds and refracts many, many different stories. Unity Church has a tradition of offering what we call a collage of voices, a collection of memories shared by some who knew Doug, which illuminate many facets of his rich and diverse life. Through these stories, the spirit of Doug's life remains. And so we begin with a remembrance from Anne-Charlotte Ackerblad. Doug will always have a special place in my heart. I was so fortunate to be invited to the Ostergren family as a young, shy exchange student in 1977. Doug's ability to listen and to give advice, wisdom, and inspiration were unique. He could truly see the whole person in those he met. I remember with joy learning about gardening, going camping on canoe trips and ski adventures together with Doug and his wonderful family. The year in your hospitable home and our meetings over the years, both in Minnesota and in Sweden, have helped me develop as a human. Thank you.
From Sarah Alexander. Grandpa cared deeply about people, listened deeply, and shared openly, making you feel heard and special with the wink of an eye, a nonverbal assurance that he saw and appreciated you. Grandpa cherished time with grandkids, whether they were hanging out at the cabin, making pancakes after a sleepover, working in the garden together, or attending one of our many sports life events. Whatever we were doing, reading, or thinking about, Grandpa wanted to hear about it and be part of it. Grandpa and Grandma instilled in their children and grandchildren a love of wilderness canoeing trips. My most formative experiences were in the Boundary Waters canoe area, and every summer I returned eager to tell Grandpa about all of my adventures. Not many people in my generation are lucky enough to cultivate an adult relationship with their grandparents. I always knew our big, tight-knit family that gathered regularly was special. However, in reflecting, I've realized how much Grandpa is woven into the fabric of my life, shaping who I am today. I endeavor to honor his memory by loving deeply, passionately making time for the hobbies I love, helping others in need, giving back to the community, and enjoying the ride of life. With a humble, adventurous spirit.
From Ann Mabbitt. I got to know Doug and Phil during the more recent part of our lives, through Mano a Mano and through Unity Church. He was a great source of personal Minnesota history for those of us who did not grow up here. I was most impressed by his and Phil's work in Nepal with the Peace Corps, and I kept them in mind while figuring out how to do good in the world through retirement.
Cheryl Sermon. I so appreciated being able to work for you while going to dental school and the example of providing excellent dental care. However, I also learned something even more important. Our interaction with a patient is more than providing dental care. It's about taking the time to care. How are they? What's going on? They need to feel important and cared for. I will admit there were times the chatting about family and life were frustrating in regards to staying on schedule, but those conversations are so, so important.
From Suzanne Brust. He was my first and longtime dentist, of course, and therefore my experience of going to the dentist has always been positive.
From Mari Hardell. My favorite memories of my grandpa are from the warm summer days we'd visit for a swim. I'd find him in his wood shop or the garden working on his many hobbies. There was always a basket of vegetables by the front door in the summer. My husband tells me that his favorite memory is from my grandpa's 86th birthday party. Someone had gotten his tractor out of the barn and parked it in the driveway near the house. It wouldn't start, and Grandpa knew there was a manual crank that could start the engine, and with a huge, fast swing of his arm, he started the tractor right up.
From Charlie Caswell. One of my favorite memories was traveling with Doug and Phil to Bolivia on a trip sponsored by Mano a Mano and celebrating their 60th anniversary by singing to them in a new medical clinic at 13,000 feet in the rural Andes, and the improvised smiley face cake.
From Lucy Hartel, one sentence from Robert Frost, "The road not taken. 2 roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. This is truly what fed Doug's soul. He loved his life."
From Jay Wiley. In the spring of 1996, at age 27, I hired a Sherpa guide in Kathmandu and started trekking from Jiri to the Everest base camp. As sweat poured down my face, I reconsidered the contents of my backpack. Dawa, my guide, was kind enough to accept my excess possessions and sell them along the trail. Ascending to higher elevations requires rest days to aid in acclimatization. During a much-needed rest day, I met a retired dentist and his wife who had returned to Nepal after setting up a dental clinic while serving in the Peace Corps. Minutes into our conversation, I felt their natural warmth and kindness and knew I had met kindred spirits. We fell into the same trekking rhythm and ultimately climbed to Kala Patar, elevation 18,519 feet, together to view Mount Everest. As we panted and labored up to the viewpoint, I felt sorry for myself and contemplated my companions. Were these 60-year-olds with smiles on their faces, or yaks in disguise? Then a group of blind trekkers descended the mountain via guide rope, came into view, and suddenly a change in perspective lightened my load. Ever since, Doug and Phil have lightened my load through their example of lives well lived.
A few words in memory of my Uncle Doug from John Ostergren. John D. Ostergren. Uncle Doug's great gift, bringing grace and light to life, twinkle-eyed sunshine. Smiling on life's path, with my dad, identical, near, inseparable. Each made his own way, in infinite subtlety, intertwined, distinct. Not like following, near without the questioning, quiet sounding boards. Doug carved his own lines, diving tower, no plane raft, M-class racing scow. Bees in balmy woods, past the sunny garden plot to the red mailbox, matching stride for stride, always Lees to my dad's Levi's, loving and distinct. Uncle Doug could wink like my dad in many ways, choosing his own genes.
From Hal Freshley. Doug is one of the nicest people I've ever known. I had recently joined Unity and only knew people in the choir. He and Phil were at an event in the Eller Isaacs backyard, and I was standing there alone. They turned to talk to me as though we'd been friends for years, and I felt like we'd been friends for years. And now we have.
From John Faley. He was a wonderful, kind, gentle man who could cut to the chase and give you some rather jolting insight at the drop of a hat. I will miss him greatly.
From Lindley Cook and David Murdoch. We met Doug and Phil in Nepal in the early 1990s. You were there volunteering in the dental clinic in Nepal, and David and I were volunteering at the small hospital an hour's walk down the hill. We made fast friends and cemented our relationship with regular Sunday visits at our place for hot food and hot showers. As well as enjoying your company, we treasured the guidance we received. This included Doug's wise counsel to approach others with humility, something I remind myself of so often. And of course, we had the inevitable advice to floss regularly. Floss the teeth you want to keep.
From Henry Alexander, Doug and Phil's grandson. When I think of Grandpa, I think of the kindness in his eyes. I think of how his face would light up each time we saw each other, how I knew without a doubt that I was loved. I think of his love for the outdoors, whether paddling through the boundary waters or working in the garden. Grandpa never let a day get by without good time outside. Perhaps most important, though, I think about Grandpa's love and care for others. Grandpa had a gift for making the people he met in his path feel seen, heard, and valued.
From Laurel Lean. Oh, Doug Ostergren, his smile, always a quiet, large, and beaming smile. We will remember that welcoming smile forever, whether standing in his gorgeous red, racy walker before a physical therapy visit, or at the cabin in Ely watching for the wooden stick weather barometer to tell us if rain was on its way or not. And Doug was so proud of his Old Town wood and canvas canoe. Eric remembers that Doug even let him carry it once. Doug just smiling and graciously inviting us to the outside table for pizza in their St. Paul home. But make no mistake, the biggest smiles were always for his beloved, Phil, and his family. Rest easy now, Doug, you are so loved. We're grateful to have journeyed a bit in your amazing and well-lived long life.
These are my own words, a small memory amidst a lifetime of precious moments to share about my dad. It's a little foggy as to when Dad learned how to ski, but I'm certain he talked about having gone to Moon Valley with others while a student at McAllister in the early 1950s. He and Mom were some of the originals at Aspen and Vail in Colorado, getting lessons from none other than Stein Erikson. We enjoyed skiing as a family, and they started us when we were little. I was 6, Joan was 5, Mary had just turned 3 years old the year we started. Sometimes, of course, Dad would fall while we were skiing, and he would do these clattering falls that would end in a snow-covered heap. Anyone watching would stop and wait and to see if he was moving again. And he always did move, with snow packed behind his sunglasses and a big smile on his face. Then we'd keep on skiing like nothing had happened. When you fall, you get up and keep going. No big deal. He'd remind us of that when we fell and got frustrated or tired, that was when we were learning new things.
Doug Ostergren was born September 22nd, 1928, and he died peacefully in his sleep at home in Shoreview on February 27th, 2025. In between these thresholds of birth and death, Doug lived a full and rich life for 96 years. Some details of Doug's life can be found in the obituary in your program. The particulars of a person's life are, of course, unique, but there's also a person's essence that shines through. A consistent thread that weaves through all of the stories that we are telling this morning. That illustrates who he truly was. The spirit of the person who loved and laughed and adventured his way with a sparkle in his eye, an expansive love in his heart through 96 vibrant years of living. 71 of those years were spent married to his beloved Phyllis, partner through so many adventures. They built together a remarkable family, a tribute to the values that they lived. We've heard stories about Doug from lifelong friends and family, and there are so many more to be shared. I hope when you go out to the reception, you keep sharing more of them. One of Doug's daughters, Jan, wrote this. He had a freckle on the tip of his nose. Now, the story was that was how people could tell him apart from his identical twin brother, Don, who was 11 minutes older. He inherited his sister's 1941 Ford and drove it into the early 1970s, much to our embarrassment. He sang in the choir at Falcon Heights United Church of Christ. He helped me move countless times between 1975 and 2003 when we finally settled down. He liked to read the paper every day and kept that up until a couple months ago. When we moved to Turtle Lake, he went all in on toys to use on the lake winter and summer, long blade ice skates for him and Mom, a pump for flooding the rink to keep the ice smooth for us to play on, a skate sail, which I've tried to use even recently. Conditions have to be just right. I'm reading this for Jan. I have no idea what a skate sail is. I am new to this state. So at the reception, somebody tell me about skate sails. A floating raft and a diving tower, an old motorboat, a rowboat, and sailboats, which I loved sailing with him. That, as a son of Michigan, I know. Dad was a beekeeper from about 1970 to 2003. He never had more than 2 hives at a time, and last year he got over 400 pounds of honey. Most summers, he and Mom planted a whole row of basil in the vegetable garden, and he often had tomatoes coming out of their ears. For a few years, he had success growing onions, and I recall some might have been donated to a silent auction at Unity. He seemed to enjoy making mulch out of the many leaves that accumulated in their big yard. He had all the right tools for that job, and any job. He had a well-equipped workshop where he spent lots of time. The phone even rings out there. Dad had our grandpa's International Harvester McCormick Deering Farm-All tractor, which he used around their big yard. Sometimes he'd even drive it down Hodgson Road over to Don's. As we were going through pictures for the slideshow and picture board, the tractor featured prominently in the albums. Growing up, I remember Dad making pancakes on weekend mornings, and he made ice cream at least once a summer. A big batch of lefse for Christmas Eve. Family and friends always helped, and it was an event. I think Mom got him going on making Neiman Marcus chocolate chip cookies. He made several batches of those cookies for Mary's wedding. I know that Mom helped very much facilitate all of Dad's adventures in the kitchen. He was a do-it-yourselfer who knew his limits. He knew when to call Brother Don or Jerry Nelson or Mike Moga to take down a tree, or Kath Oil to fix the furnace, or nephew-in-law Willie, or son-in-law Tom. Dad always walked people to the door at the end of the visit, or out to the car, a master of the Minnesota goodbye. And I think that not being able to do this was one of the hardest things for him as he became less mobile. We've heard how adventurous Doug was. This is back to me. Joining the Peace Corps along with Phil in retirement, traveling to exciting places. They joined with folks from Unity as pilgrims to our partner church in Home Road St. Peter in Transylvania, to Boston, to the heart of Unitarian Universalism, to learn about our heritage as a faith movement, to Bolivia with Mano a Mano, where they celebrated their 60th anniversary in a mountainside medical clinic. In his latter years, as Doug's Parkinson's advanced, he and Phil stayed mostly at home, engaging in the world with many visitors and also online, regularly attending Unity's Sunday live streaming worship service. Doug's life and how he moved through it with joy, creativity, curiosity, service, love has been a model for so many of those who have been part of it, so many voices that we heard today. A pilgrim at heart, Doug's life was guided by a spirit of adventure and discovery, deepening and transforming his own life and others. Doug, Phil, and I, and a lot of people in this room, I'm told, all served in the Peace Corps. And when I do memorial services for Peace Corps volunteers, I always try and include this piece from Sergeant Shriver, the first director of the agency, from a 1963 speech he gave in Thailand. In this world of the Cold War and many little hot wars, this world of the hydrogen bomb, the Atlantic Alliance, SEATO, the Sino-Soviet split, on this giant Asian continent where communist subversion, guerrilla warfare, and political uncertainty occupy much of your time and thought, what room is there for a Peace Corps? What difference can it possibly make in the face of such enormous and complex forces that a few thousand Americans go overseas to serve humankind? Isn't it an illusion to think that the Peace Corps might actually help to bring peace, help to change the world? Let me start my answer with a question. What is going to change the world? If you believe we must live together in a different way in this conflict-ridden world, how is that going to come about? Guns won't change the world. That is one of the great lessons of this bloody century. Dollar bills won't change the world, nor will simple goodwill or even international organizations. What can change the world today is the same thing that has changed it in the past, an idea, and the service of dedicated, committed individuals to that idea. The service of dedicated, committed individuals to an idea. And if we can be among them, as Doug was, surely we are in the company of saints. Would you please rise in body or in spirit and join in singing hymn number 159, This Is My Song. Please be seated. These words from Joan Didion illuminate Doug's own disposition on life and our own charge and our remembrance of him. I'm just telling you to live in it. Not just to endure it, not just to suffer it, not just to pass through it, but to live in it, to look at it, to try and get the picture, to live recklessly, to take chances, to make your own work and take pride in it, to seize the moment. And if you should ask me why you should bother to do that, I could tell you that the grave's a fine and private place, but none, I think, do there embrace, nor do they sing there or write or see the tidal bore of the Amazon or touch their children. And that's what there is to do, and get it while you can. And good luck at it. This we know. All life is a gift. Doug Ostergren's life was a gift. Look around for a moment in this room. See the people here. All of these lives touched by one life. All gathered here. This is the measure of a life. Doug's love of learning, life, adventure that inspired so many others. Doug's unique expression of those gifts will be missed. You can honor his memory best by your own expression of his legacy. Keep telling the stories that we've started to tell today. In the days ahead, in his honor and in gratitude for the time left in your own life. Mary Oliver wrote this: "To live in this world, you must be able to do three things: to love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends on it, and when it comes time to let it go, to let it go." And so we extinguish this flame, knowing that the spark of life still burns within each of us. And we know that the light of Doug's life still shines within our hearts. In the spirit of love we have gathered. In the spirit of love we depart. Gentle people, go in peace, and amen.